Okay, so for those of you who are here and for those of you who are not here, we are going to get started into the respiratory system. So a reminder, you need to get everything done and turned in for your heart stuff today. That'd be good. Still haven't heard from Chris. Okay, so we are now getting into heart. Okay, and so now when we were talking about the heart, you know, I said the heart's probably going to be a little bit easier for everybody because they kind of understand. They understand what the heart does, and they've heard about the heart, and you might even seen some stuff about the heart. But when it comes to the lungs, outside of the shape of the lungs, I think people don't really know what's going on. So they don't know the structures. They don't know what's going on. They don't. It's just they just know that shape. Okay, which is kind of this shape here. You get this shape, and that's what people think about. Okay, so when we get into this heart thing, you're going to be learning some terms that you've probably heard before, but we're going to make sense of a lot of stuff when it comes to like bronchitis and things like that. We're going to know what that actually means. Okay, so as we go, these are the slides that you're going to kind of need to know. Okay, and or these pictures. We want you to be able to understand these pictures. And so this is gonna we're gonna get in through the conducting portion and through the whatever. So we're gonna talk about all these different parts of the lung. We're gonna talk about the main bronchus and the bronchioles, and we're gonna talk about the alveolar, the terminal ends, and all that kind of stuff that goes along with this respiratory system. And the other part about it is this as well, is that um, this is a lot of pressure stuff too. You know, the heart was pressure with fluid, right? With blood going from one chamber to another, and the ventricle contracting and building pressure enough to blow through that semilunar valve and all that kind of stuff. Well, we're kind of also talking about pressures here. And we're going to talk about volume, how big the lungs are, watching that diaphragm drop down, increasing the space, which decreases the pressure, which has anyway air come in. So we're talking about pressure with this, okay? So, um, yeah. So these are the parts you're going to need to know. Okay, and we're going to kind of go through this. Here we can see the heart there in that pericardial cavity. Okay, and nestled in there between the lungs. Okay, and so here we're going to be studying the pulmonary side of things, right? So that part from the right side of the heart through the pulmonary arteries into the lungs. That's where we're going to be kind of at. Okay, I'm not going to go through the heart again, but we're going to go through that. Okay. So I have sent you these slides, and I've also sent you um, the notes. So I want you to um, get those out and fill them out. They'll help you. Okay. So the major function of the respiratory system is to supply the body with oxygen. All right. So and also to dispose of carbon dioxide. Okay. So the major thing that the respiratory system does is it gets oxygen into the system and carbon dioxide out of the blood. Okay. Now, as far as transporting all that, that's the blood. That's the cardiovascular system, right? The pump and the piping and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the exchange, getting oxygen into the blood and carbon dioxide out, that is your lungs. That is the respiratory system. Okay? So, that's the major function. Oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. All right, we're going to talk about two different portions, two different zones. Okay? One zone is the respiratory zone. Okay? And you can see there on the right that we're talking about the bronchioles and the alveolar. Okay? So these look like trees, they look like grapes, they look like I don't know, whatever. But these are little. This is the air-filled sacs here. These are the actual site of the gas exchange. Okay, so when we talk about that thin membrane, that single squamous layer of cells, flat, thin, that allows for that passage of oxygen and carbon dioxide between, this is where we're at. This is where we're finally getting down to where we're talking about. Okay, so this is the actual area that this happens with the blood vessels. Some exchange respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts. The alveolar is the major site. Okay, so it gets all pretty thin down in this area here, but for the most part, the major site of this is in these alveoli. I always say alveoli, probably, but alveoli. Okay. The other portion of this zone, the other zone, is the conducting zone, the ability to get it there. Okay, and it's not only just getting it there, but it's also putting the air in the right humidity, warmth, purifying it. Okay, that conducting portion does those things. It helps get the crud out of there. It helps moisten it up, and it helps warm it up before it actually gets into the lungs. Okay, and so we have the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, and the primary bronchi are all part of the conducting zones. Okay, once you get off the primary bronchi, then we got to get back up into these bronchioles and alveolar ducts. Okay, and those are respiratory zones. Okay, so um, so what we're going to start with is we're going to start with the conducting portion. And so when we talk about purifying and humidifying and warming, we're going to end up getting back into a little bit of skeletal system where we talked about the nasal cavities, we talked about the conchas and the inferior and the superior and the middle nasal concha and the mucous membranes and all that kind of garbage that's up in there, right? So we're talking about up in here. So now here we are. We're up in the nose area. Okay? This airway through the nose provides an airway for respiration. Okay? It's an airway for whatever. These mucous membranes and this area up in here helps humidify and warm the air. Okay, so you can think like on a really, really, really cold day, and you've been out running, and how it hurts your lungs. Your mucous membranes are not able to keep up with warming and humidifying it, and it's really hurting your lungs because that cold air is not conducive to what you want to have going on down there. So your nose, breathing through your nose generally helps moisten and warm the air. And also with these mucous membranes and the cilia, right, it helps filter the air. So in order for us to get the best amount of filtration, it's best to breathe through your nose and out through your mouth. Okay, having that air go in here, swirl around, whatever else, and go down through there, that would be better than just sucking through your mouth and down. Okay, think about, I don't know if any of you have baled hay before, but after you bale hay, you blow your nose and it's black. And that's part of that filtering process here. If you would not breathe through that and breathe through your mouth, that hay chaff is going to get in through your mouth and hopefully not down into your lungs, because then if it does, that's an irritant and you're going to be coughing. Okay. This other portion, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So it provides an airway for respiration. So your nose provides a airway for respiration. It warms and moistens the air, and it filters. Okay. The other part is we know this, the olfactory. The olfactory bulbs are up in here. From the ethmoid bone, right? The olfactory foramen. They go down there, and this helps with your sense of smell. The other portion is that it helps. It's a resonating chamber, right, for sound waves, right? If you would take and hold your nose, your voice is going to sound different because the resonation from your vocal cords is different. It doesn't resonate all through here anymore. It's coming out your mouth. If you have a really bad sinus infection, that's going to change your voice sometimes because it cuts down on the amount of resonation that is happening. Okay, so these 5 things that we're talking about providing an airway, moistening and warming the air, filtering the air, their sense of smell, and resonating chamber, okay, for sound waves. So when we talk about the filtering portion, we talk about cilia. Right? We're not talking about microvilli. We're talking about cilia, right? Microvilli help increase surface area. Remember we talked about that. But cilia, they move, and they're designed to move things around. So mucus traps the junk that you breathe in through your nose, like the hay chaff, and the cilia sweeps it up towards your throat so that you can swallow it or spit it out. Okay, so you're going to have these cilia in the primary bronchus, right? So you're going to have it all the way down in here and into this trachea. Okay, so you're going to have this cilia. We just talked about how we had cilia, and that's right. We talked about how we had mucus and cilia up in the nasal part, and now when we're talking about down in here. So if this misses some, like the hay chaff, we've done a lot, and this gets down into here, we have mucus and cilia down in these parts here as well to have the junk stick to it, and then the cilia move upwards and carry this stuff up to the throat, where back in here, where it either can be spit out or swallowed. All right, they call that the mucociliary ladder. The mucociliary ladder, and the ladder meaning it brings it up. Now, if you smoke, or you know somebody who does smoke, and they have a cough, one of the things that they've had a problem with is that they've killed the cilia. Okay, so the mucus is there to trap the garbage. However, the cilia is not there to move it up to either be spit out or swallowed. And so they have mucus that builds up in this area, and they have a constant cough because what they're doing is they're trying to clear the mucus out. Do we understand that? So, I don't even know if there's anybody here. Yeah, there's a few. Okay, so when we talk about these primary bronchi, you know, we still have protection, the ability to kind of help filter and get stuff out. So, a smoker's cough is because the smoke has killed the cilia. Okay, so here's a cold day, runny nose. Okay. Now we had cilia right here that we just talked about down through here. Okay. Now we're talking about the cilia that's up in here. Okay, so on a cold day, your nose becomes sluggish and slow, and where the cilia becomes sluggish and they become slow. And so when they're cold, they don't move the mucus down into your throat, right? So instead of it moving down your throat into the back where you're swallowing it unknowingly, the mucus kind of gets stuck up there in the nose and accumulates and starts to dribble out, right? So really what it is when you have a runny nose, when you're outside working or something and your nose runs because it's cold, it's because the cilia aren't beating and moving things to the back of your throat and down into your, to be swallowed or spit out. It's kind of staying. They're not moving, and so that is a real life example of how much these cilia actually move stuff around. Okay, so most of us aren't smoking, and most of us don't have a smoker's cough. But we do know how our nose does run on a cold day, and so you can see how much those cilia, when they're not there, how much of a big deal it is. Okay. So when we talk about the nasal concha, right, we talked about those when we looked at the skull. Right. We look here. Here's the nasal bone, and we have the septum, and we have our cavities, but then we have these concha that are twirl, right? So these nasal or the nasal turbinates, right? So the turbinates are going to help you more because one of the things that they do is they increase surface area of the mucous membranes, which will help warm it and filter it, right? So, and it also increases the turbulence, so it's kind of like a mini tornado effect, right? So they want that air to go in there, and they don't want it just to shoot in straight, unimpeded, right down into the lungs, because that's going to be hard for you to warm, moisten, and filter. And so those little um, turbinates in there, those little concha in there, will have that air will go in. It will swirl around. It will it'll be exposed to more mucous membranes. Stuff will get caught and stuck on the mucus, and then it'll be warmed and it'll go down and keep getting stuck on mucus. Or okay, and so that is the function of those, not just to block airway. Because if you think about it, you know, people have their nose broke, and they have septum defects where they are pushed over and they have a hard time breathing. And so you sit there and think, why would we be created with little things in there that actually cause the air to not flow as quickly as possible? But if you look at it that way, they're there to swirl the air, to warm the air, to cause it to be exposed to more mucous membrane surface, to cause a better filter. Okay, so intelligent design, you're going to see it all the time. Okay, so these things increase surface area, swirl the air, and help with the filtering. So the nasal cavity separated from the oral cavity by the palate, right? So the roof of the mouth. Okay. The anterior portion of this is a hard palate, okay, and the posterior portion is soft back in here. Okay, and so we have this division between the nasal and the oral by this bone and this soft cartilagey type thing here. Okay, paranasal sinus functions. All right, so sinuses in general, we learned lighten the skull. Okay, so we learned that all those sinuses throughout, they lighten the skull. And so what the other part is what they help, well, with resonance, right? When we have a bad sinus infection, when we have, and those are packed full, our voice sounds different. Not a whole bunch, not like when we hold our nose shut, but when our sinuses are full, it will cause your voice to change. The other portion the sinuses do, it helps provide mucus and produce mucus, right? We need the mucus there to catch the garbage. So like when you're outside at a ball game, at a baseball game, or you're outside at track and the wind blows up and it catches dust and dirt and you close your eyes but you're breathing still, some of that dust and dirt is in that air, and you don't want that to hit your lungs. Because as we're going to learn when we get down into the exchange area, that thin, delicate tissue, we don't want sand and dirt and hay chaff and whatever else in there. Okay. So chronic sinusitis. Okay. So when we look at this, we can see the dark portion, like through here. This is a normal one. We see the sinuses, paranasal. We have the nasal cavity. We have the ethmoid sinuses up in there, okay? Chronic sinusitis, right, is where we continually get this sinus that is packed full of crud and usually causing an infection, itis, okay? And so we see that here with chronic sinusitis. So if you have a family member or you've had it yourself or you have problems with your sinuses, this thing doesn't drain like it should. It fills with mucus and garbage and ends up becoming an area for infection. Okay? Stop and be sure you clean. Okay, blah, blah. Okay, so we don't want to try this at home, right? But, usually those guys that do tricks, that human blockhead, he would, I don't know if this will still work, but he would insert that. You can check that out. It's a trick. It's an anatomy trick, really, where he would put it in and disappear and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, okay. But what he's doing is he's taking advantage, anatomically, he's putting it through that nasal cavity all the way back into here, but while missing the turbinates, the concha. Okay. I think I'll do this last one and then I'll be done. The pharynx, however you want to say it, the pharynx. Okay. The pharynx serves as a common passageway for food and air. Okay. So when we're talking about this, they color coded this pharynx in three different parts. All right, so we have this pharynx, which is this area right through here, all the way down here to where your esophagus is, all the way up here to the back of your nasal cavity. Okay, but this thing basically serves as a common passageway. Air can go through there, air can go through there, right? Food and drink generally go through here, although somebody will say something funny and make you laugh, and you milk or pop or what water shoots out of your nose, right? Well, that's it forces its way up and out. Okay? All right, so the names of these different parts will give you clues as to where it is. Okay, so when we talk about the nasopharynx, that's air only. Okay, so here we are. Nasopharynx, that's air only, right? Food and water generally don't get up in here. It does on occasion, but for the most part, no. So, air only. So when we swallow, the soft palate and the uvula rise upward to close off that, which prevents food and fluid from entering, right? So when we swallow, this soft palate and the uvula move up and block that off so that food and fluid won't go up into your nasal cavity, right? Well, it's no good to get a pea stuck up in the back of your nose, okay? Anyway, so when you see a kid sneeze, and like the little kids, and they sneeze, and that piece of spaghetti shoots out of their out of their nose, what's happened is they sneeze fast enough where the spaghetti has gone through and before this uvula and the soft palate could close and it went through. Okay. So the other part here is the oro and the laryngopharynx, right? So the oro is in the back of the mouth, and the larynx, the laryngopharynx, is down here. Okay? And so the oro and the laryngeo are both food, liquid, and air, right? Food will be directed posteriorly to the esophagus, air will go anteriorly to the larynx, okay? So, if we look at this, no, we'll just stop there, okay? So, the naso is air only, the oro and the laryngeo are food, liquid, and air. That soft palate and the uvula rise to block that off. The sinuses, the nasal cavity, right? There's that soft palate and the uvula hanging down. When you swallow, those close and don't allow food and stuff to go up into there. The conchas swirl the air, warm the air, humidify the air, and allow that air to get exposed to more mucus so that it'll trap all the garbage that you breathe in. Cilia becomes slow. That's why your nose runs. You have cilia all down through here and mucus to catch stuff as it goes. If you smoke, your cilia die and you're unable to get the mucus up, so you have to cough it up. Okay? Alright, so there we go. We are done for today. But we'll work through that, get your stuff turned in, get your questions put in, and anyway, you guys have a good day. If you have any questions, you give me a call. We'll go through and get through the quiz 1, and then what we'll do is we'll have a Zoom session or something, and to review and ask questions, and we'll just go from there. All right. Have a good